I'm Irene, known as Irene here in the UK, originally from Spain, but I live in Edinburgh, UK. I lived here for the past 11 years, I would say, although in the UK for the past 14. So yeah, I made it home. And yeah, I'm a running coach. I specialize in ultramarathons. And also one of my specialties, which I would love to share today, is that I coach women. I specialize on women physiology, and I've done a small project based on that. And yeah, and I'm also a sports scientist currently. And yeah, a bit of a science nerd, I would say.
Before we get into all of that, and we're definitely going to be talking about the ultra running and coaching women specifically. It'll be great to learn more about the small project you're doing as well. Tell us more about your early years. Were you sporty and active? Were you living like an outdoor lifestyle in Spain?
My family was always very active. So yeah, we spent a lot of time outdoors and everything. Growing up very early in life, I developed an eating disorder. So for me, sports was restricted. I had to be admitted in hospital for several years and so on. So yeah, like sports for me, a big part of my life was non-existent. So I actually started to be involved more in sports and running when I came to the UK. And yeah, like it was when I started my PhD in 2017 when I got involved more in like running competitions. I did a couple of 10K runs just to raise money for motor neuron disease research. And then from that, as we all want to go further and explore more, I then decided that I'd like to do a half marathon. And I think it was from the time I discovered I could run 21K that I became a little bit addicted to ultra distances. And then I did a big jump and then I fell in love with the sports.
So let's just go back to sort of 2017 to your PhD. So what were you studying at this point?
At this point, I was a neuroscientist. I loved the brain and I loved how it worked since I was very young. At that time, I was very interested in how we could repair the brain to treat diseases like Alzheimer's disease and multiple sclerosis. But then time was quite hard. Anyone involved in academia will understand me. And so I did a struggle during that time. Then I progressed into my postdoc, and I think it was at that time in which I collapsed. I experienced a burnout, and then it was at this time when I was already involved in ultramarathon competition in which I decided to do a shift in my career, and is when then I set my coaching business.
So you're studying the brain, you're doing your PhD, you're finding it quite stressful. And so did you get into running, I suppose, to help deal with that stress?
I guess when I was running, I would disconnect. And it was more when I started to run these long distances when I could like connect with a part of, sounds like weird, but between ultra runners, we are going to understand each other, right? So I could connect with a part of myself that I didn't know it exists. And actually, I was an ultra runner before I even knew about ultra marathons, right? Because I would go and then run for like 50K without knowing what ultra marathons were. But yeah, it was during these moments in which I would connect with myself and then being calm and everything. However, also at the beginning of my journey, I would say that yeah, I used running as an stress tool, but at that time I had, well, because of like everything that happened early in life, I wasn't feeling enough during these runs. So that brought me to constantly have niggles and injuries and everything. So yeah, it was through running that I connected with a part of myself that actually helped me heal in a way.
During this time, were you also like speaking with a therapist? Were you getting other support to help you?
No, I was very alone during that time. I would say that everything I learned, first I have to fail. This is the way I work. I'm going to make all the mistakes first to then know very well the thing that I'm doing. And with running was the same. So when I started my journey, I was very alone. I didn't actually know what I was doing. I wasn't like even going to therapies or anything until I got injured badly, and then I had to stop. And then was at this point in which I met my current physiotherapist, who is now, well, my colleague is the clinic where I currently work.
Like, just hearing those words, like, very alone, like, it's just like, oh, because also, you're in a different country, you're doing your PhD as well, and, like, they're all quite, like, solo sports or solo activities in a way, because I suppose when you're thinking about your PhD and trying to add knowledge to the world, it's like you've got to be the one to do the thinking that's on you to achieve that. And then going out running for you, again, sort of by yourself and maybe not having that support team around you. So the injury, I suppose you said it was like that turning point. I suppose it was that just because it made you stop and it gave you time out to think and reflect? Or what happened at that injury point or just after? Like, how did you change things so that you weren't alone and that you had more support around you?
Yeah, it's like crazy, right? Because the injury was an inflection point in my life. So at that point, I was working on a paper. We were fighting to have it published in a very high impact journal. And it was a very, very stressful time. And then I remember that I was already feeling that my knee was hurting and everything. But then after 2 years of working on that paper and everything, they sent us the notice that it had been rejected again. It was actually, I had joined my first ultra at that point, and so it was a bit of like, I did this race as a bit of with anger and with like, I need to know that can be happening. So I did that race really badly. Obviously, I didn't fuel during the race. I almost couldn't walk at the end of the race. And after the race, obviously, I couldn't walk or run. It was at that point that I was like, I can't just not do the thing that is helping me, right? That I like to do. So was when I got in touch with physiotherapists I work, and then is when we started a good relationship. We became friends, and then from that point, I also started to study how to coach myself. Because obviously, as a scientist, I knew that I was doing everything wrong. So I had to, as I said, I like to do things well. So it was at that point that I started to study how to coach ultramarathons very deeply and everything. But at that point, I was still like thinking that I would become a scientist, that I would have my own group. And I even had an interview at the University of Oxford for a potential fellow and everything. But it was towards this, after this injury, I don't know what happened with my career. Everything was like, I was losing the attachment with my career, and without realizing, I was building a journey towards another path. And then it was in 2022, at the end of that year, that then I couldn't work anymore as a neuroscientist. And then I left academia. I left my job. I became unemployed. And then is when I started to work together with my physio. She believed in me. And then thanks to her, like I could start building my career path towards another direction.
How old were you at this point?
That was 4 years ago. So 33.
It's so interesting because in my head, I'm thinking, I was wondering if you were around 32, 33, because I think it's from a lot of the women I've spoken to, that almost seems to be a point where women are like, they've been working so hard in their careers. And then suddenly they're like, hold on, this isn't working for me anymore. I want to make a change. Do I want to be doing this for the next like 10, 20, 30 years? Or certainly in my experience, in my case, that was something that happened to me. The other thing as well, which I keep thinking about is the injury, because at that time, that's the worst possible thing that could have happened to you, getting that injury. But on the flip side, that was the best possible thing to happen for you to get that injury. And it's the same with, I suppose, leaving your career, your job, leaving academia. On one hand, that is the worst possible thing, leaving your career, you're now unemployed, back to square zero. There could be like that sunk cost fallacy of the years that you've spent dedicated to your research. And then it's the best thing that could have ever possibly happened to you, being at that start zero again with a fresh slate to really design and create the life that you wanted to lead, which was, moving into that coaching space. And I think this is really fascinating, I suppose, for you as well, being a scientist and studying like the brain, because like there's so much mental involved in like these physical challenges. So I'd love to know more about sort of learning how to, you said like learning how to coach yourself. What did that look like for you?
As I said, I'm a science nerd, so I went like deeply into, well, like into mechanisms, physiology, reading papers, and so on. So, yeah, I also got, well, I got as certifications and everything to be able to start coaching. So I guess that was really fun and quite addictive as well, because it's something that at the end it was so applicable to me that it got like, like as if you are, I don't know, making a puzzle, right? So you're trying to find all the pieces to then be able to build your own training plan and obviously do the mistakes and know how you respond. And I don't know, like I thought that was quite fun actually. It became from like being my hobby to being my working space, which was very cool. Also, I think doing the change from academia to what I'm doing now, it was obviously hard at the beginning, right? Well, you've experienced something similar as well. So when you like have a burnout and suddenly you change, you are sort of in a cloud in the unknown, what's going to happen with me. But also you feel so free, like, wow, now it's me and the world, so I can do anything I want. So yeah, like that's how I felt. And then like building my coaching and studying. And then I went on to study another master's in sports science. So I think all that was super fun. So it's something that I had a lot of fun doing, to be fair.
I think one of the things that you probably almost notice straight away is that there is such a gap in the science for evidence-based guidance and research for women on women across the board, whether that's how women should strength train, the research into women and sports and pregnancy, but you started focusing on a specific research area, didn't you? Do you want to share more about that?
Yeah, so actually that's crazy, right? Because as women, something that I realize is that we normalize a lot of things in society, and it's really crazy. And something that when I was working as a neuroscientist, is just to give you an example, right? All the models that you would use were males because females are too complex to be studied, right? And are things that you obviously as a PhD you normalize. Everything has to be on males model because women are expensive. But then obviously, as you suddenly get into a model that is you, it's like, well, but I have so many questions about myself, about when I train, that I'm actually not being able to find the evidence published. And then is when you, obviously, as I said, I'm a scientist, so I like to look at the literature and everything. And suddenly you realize that there's nothing. And it's crazy. And you start seeing that even for like drug discovery and so on, it was just in the 90s when they started to introduce guidelines to put females into clinical trials. So imagine in the sports field, something that is a hobby for a lot of people or something where there's not a lot of money, how much of the women is going to be studied, right? So something that I found when I was trying to answer my own questions as a woman is that when I went into the literature, there was nothing or everything that was published was super confusing because up to now, there are very little guidelines as to how to study women's, how to structure the different phases of the menstrual cycle. So everything is super confusing and there's so much noise online. There's so much noise on social media that is actually crazy. So that's why from all this, I decided to do my own research investigating on how the menstrual cycle would affect performance in ultra runners, which obviously has never been done. I learned a lot about me. I learned a lot about how to coach women. As I said, there's a lot of noise on what is being said about the menstrual cycle. A lot of this noise, what makes is that makes women to be scared of their own menstrual cycle. And at the end, a menstrual cycle for a woman is the best thing that can happen to us, right? Because it's a health marker. So it's something that is made for us to be mothers, right? So if we stop losing it, that means that we are not healthy, right? Our body is trying to stop our own body just to keep the reserves to keep functioning. I think instead of looking at the menstrual cycle as something that is performance driven, we need to start looking at the menstrual cycle as a health marker, right? So, yeah, it is true. So, what I found from my own research, yeah, it is true that women's do actually feel very different during the different phases of the menstrual cycle. But actually, when we look at the physiological markers, at performance markers, there are no differences in how we can perform at the different phases. But it's super interesting because then I think training needs to be very individualized for the women that do actually have the symptomatology, right? Because symptomatology can make us perform worse or make that the quality of the training is worse. So I think it's a lot of educating these women on how to respond to training. But I wouldn't strictly say that all the women need to be training in a similar way, because that's not true. And for a lot of women, that would be more detrimental than beneficial.
It's so interesting because I think back to 2015, 2016, so 11 years ago when I was training for Marathon Dressage. I wasn't working with a coach. I basically just downloaded like a standard multi-day marathon training plan, and I just followed it or tried to follow it to the best of my ability. Back then, I honestly just didn't even think about periods and them affecting me just because it was never discussed. There just wasn't that level of information, or if there was, I certainly wasn't aware of it. And it's interesting because I think back and I was literally like, there'll be moments when I was training when I'd be like, am I tired or am I lazy? Because I'd be beating myself up thinking, stop being lazy, go out and do your run, but having no connection to the fact that maybe I was feeling tired because I had my period. And whereas now I think a couple of years ago, we had Dr. Stacey Sims on the podcast, and one of her top pieces of advice was to track your period. And so I've been doing that for a number of years. And it is so interesting because there are days when I feel like death. Death warmed up. I can barely move. And normally or years ago, I'd like push on through, be like, no, no, like motion creates emotion, go to the gym, go and work out, get outside. And then as I've gotten older, I've realized, no, no, it's okay. You can have a really quiet day, do some yin yoga, do some stretching, be really kind to yourself for a couple of days, and then you can hit the gym and be super, super strong. But I really liked what you said as well as about for women as well. There's such a variety. So actually, what works for one woman isn't necessarily going to work for another woman because there'll be such a difference in periods from the length, the amount of blood coming out, and some people feel really, because I've had days where I felt really powerful on like the first day of my period, like, oh my God, I can smash this. And then other days where I'm just a piece of wet lettuce, just not able to do anything. And so it's so individualized. So how do you make that work when you're coaching women and to do it on an individual basis?
Yeah, so obviously as a coach, and this is something that I'm finding that a lot of coaches don't do, you need feedback. You need feedback from your athletes, and you need to be very open to have these conversations. You need to make them natural. And the thing is that is what I say, you need to educate women. And it's something worrying, right? Because something that I found is that a lot of women, even they normalize that maybe they are gonna miss their periods because they are training. So there are two things here. We need to track that our women's are having healthy menstrual cycles, so they are regular. Another thing is that if they have the symptoms, they have to be open and they have to tell you. And as I said, no, you're not gonna be strict with all the women on because you are in the luteal phase, I'm just going to put you on easy week. No, that's not how it works, because there are women that have set records for marathon races in the luteal phase. So we can't be strict on that. But I think we need to work on with every woman and make the conversations very natural with them.
You've done some really great races. What's the longest distance that you've run?
104 in UTS, Snowdonia. Quite a hardcore race, I would say. The best one in my life. Huh? It's a difficult one. It's super, super technical, super hilly. So it's a slow, an amazing one, I would say. It's, yeah.
Let's dig into that race then, the Ultra Trail Snowdonia, because it would just be really great to hear about your experiences with the race in terms of your planning and preparation to get yourself to the start line feeling fit, confident, strong, and ready to take on that challenge.
For these kind of races, I would say, I mean, obviously, I do study the races a lot. So what I do is to look at the demands of each of the races, and I break them. I break like how much incline they have, what parts are the technical bits, the weather that is gonna potentially be happening during race day, foods that I'm gonna be taking, and I break the race, and then is what I put into my training chunks of the race to make sure that I will be able to complete strong these races. When I did UTS, it was very interesting, right? Because I had to listen a lot to my body because, as I said, I was growing my coaching business. I was studying my MSc. I was doing the research in women's, and I was working at the clinic. So, adding an ultra marathon on top of that was a bit crazy. So yeah, my training had to be super, super specific and super, super efficient to make sure that I was not going to be too fatigued for my next training. I was going to be able to perform well.
How did you get the balance right to make sure that you could perform well? How did you make it work for you and your lifestyle?
I guess you have to prioritize. You have to focus a lot. So all the things that are not needed at that time, I mean, obviously it's gonna be a time that it's not gonna go forever. But yeah, I would say that focus is the main thing. So you need to know what you're gonna be doing at every moment, I would say, and in every training. So yeah, you can't just put a session because you want to do more mileage. You really need to be super, super specific.
Are you doing strength and conditioning or yoga or cross training? What does that look like?
Yeah, so obviously, strength training is non-negotiable for all runners. I would say that during that period, I'm always saying how important strength training is, and I was doing the absolute minimum to not get injured. So at the end, obviously, you have limited time, so as I said, you have to do what you need to do to get through it. But yeah, when I train for these kind of races, obviously, you have to break the period from now until the race into different phases, and in every phase obviously you're going to be simulating different physiological aspects to be able to get you fit for the race.
How do you find it in the final phase when you're having to taper? Do you cope well during that stage? Because I know like quite a lot of people can struggle with the taper because there's so much energy in the body and they're wanting to run, but they're obviously trying to hold it back to save everything for race day. How do you make that work for you?
I would say that in the past I used to be very stressed about that. But as I said, like I think the more and more ultras I do and the more and more I train for these races, you start learning that there are periods in which you're gonna have to train less. So I actually try to embrace every part of the training. So I don't tend to stress anymore when I'm tapering, and I just take it as an opportunity to do things that I would not normally be able to do. So and relaxing things, of course. But yeah, I don't over stress over taper anymore. I think it's very important, and it's very important during that phase also to visualize, right? What can go well, what can go wrong in the race, and just like prepare your mind for like celebrating, which is what we are gonna do in the race, right?
Absolutely. So take us to UTS Ultra Trail Snowdonia. Like, what were some of the highlights for you? What were some of those magical moments? What were some of the challenging sections?
Yeah, I would say that I don't think I had any bad moment. So yeah, a lot of people tends to say like, oh, trail races, you're just gonna go and suffer. I would say that I just loved every part of this race. The thing is that I have a story with this race too, because when I quit my job in academia, I attempted this race, but obviously that period was a lot of changes in my life. So I DNF that race, and I DNF'd it in the last checkpoint. So I had only one checkpoint to go, and it was mostly because of mindset strategy. Obviously, a lot happened in my life at that point, so I thought I wasn't capable, and that's why I DNF, because I thought I wouldn't be able to finish the race. And was at the moment I wake up the following day, in which I was like, "You're stupid. You could have done it. You could have completed it. I don't know why, you know." So I learned a lot. So when I came back to do that race, was pretty magical, because I could like go through everything I went the first time I attempted the race, and I remember all the sensations and everything. But I was having so much joy during that race that I think was like really great. Also, I ran like so much faster than the first time that I don't know, was like one of the best races of my life, I would say.
Do you know, I love that though, because it really draws home the point that A, it doesn't need to be a sufferfest. It almost feels as though it's, even though it's the same race, it's two very, very different races. You know, the first race, you know, there's so much going on mentally, you weren't sort of necessarily there in the headspace. And but then the second time, it was joyful. It wasn't a sufferfest. You had that confidence to really go out there and to give it your best. Well, you know, it's like you talk about as well on your website, you know, train for body and mind, because it is, you have to train your body 100% without a doubt, got to be trained physically. But there still is the mental side. Let's just dig into that into a little bit more detail about the mental preparation. You know, what are the tips and tricks for other runners to mentally make sure that they've trained their brain for success?
And ultras is going to be during the race, and it's going to be during the training, right? For instance, so that everyone can understand it. When you do a speed session and you know that it's going to be a really hard one, right? A lot of the times you think, oh, I'm not going to be able to do it. How am I going to achieve that? But once you get into the job and you focus on every little part of the workout, you're doing it. And at the end, you're in the last rep and it's like, okay, I made it, right? So I think it's the same in ultra marathons. It's just not believing everything your brain is gonna tell you, because a lot of the time it's just gonna seek comfort. And yeah, if you start convincing yourself of all the bad things, you're gonna believe them, right? So yeah, so that's why I learned a lot with my first DNF in Snowdonia, right? Because if you convince yourself of one thing, that's gonna happen. So if you do the shift and you prepare yourself to have the best time, you're actually gonna have the best time. You're gonna be able to problem solve more efficiently. You are gonna be able to know how to pace yourself more efficiently. You're gonna be able to not stress when things like maybe something happens, right? Because obviously in these races you're gonna do mistakes. So if you are in a better headspace, you're gonna be sharper with your decisions.
Do you want to share more about your coaching philosophy?
So I think it's very important to train smart, and also something that I like to focus on is on longevity, right? You need to do the training thinking that you can do it for a long time, right? At the end, if you don't plan your year properly, you don't train correctly for the races, you put too much of everything, you're gonna break. And at the end, it's something that you want to do for a very long time. So yeah, I think it's very important to have the balance of everything.
Balance is something that I actually, I think I don't really struggle with that anymore, but many, many, many years ago, I definitely used to struggle with that balance. But it's something that I've worked really, really hard on now. But Irene, how can people connect with you? How can they find out more about your coaching, follow along with your races on social media? Where are you most active?
I would say that nowadays I'm most active on Instagram is at Train for Body Mind. I'm also very active on Strava. I have a lot of fun on that space too, and through my website as well. So I like to, now that I have slightly more time, I like to write articles and post them in my blog. So yeah, that's another place where people can find a little bit more about my coaching, my ideas, and my science.
Irene, I'd love to leave you with the opportunity to share your final words of advice, final words of wisdom for other women who want to take the plunge into ultra running, take that next step, push themselves a little bit further. Apart from just do it, what advice would you like to share?
Do it and believe in yourself because you are capable of much more than you think. And if you struggle and you don't know how to make your training and everything, seek for help because at the end, like asking for help is the most wise decision that we can do because at the end, there's people that are going to be able to give us the tools, right? So that we can be successful.
It's definitely one of the wisest decisions you can do. Seek help, ask those questions, bring in the experts, and believe in yourself. Irene, thank you so much for believing in yourself. Thank you for all the amazing work that you are doing to increase the knowledge around the menstrual cycle and how it affects the performance in female ultra runners. This is so needed. Just best of luck with all of your races and challenges in 2026.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, tribe. How are you all doing? I hope you're super well. It's Sarah, the host of the Tough Girl podcast, just touching base, checking in with you all, and just giving you a little mini update of what I've been up to. So I just finished my training hike, which was the Two Saints Way, walking in the UK through the countrysides of Cheshire and Staffordshire, from Lichfield Cathedral all the way through to Chester Cathedral. It is about 93-mile journey, variety of terrain, lots of canal walking, lots of roads. You go past lots of churches. It's an adorable little walk, actually. And so I've been out there in the heat, tracking it, sharing it on social media at Tough Girl Challenges. So you can go and read all of the stats. There'll be a total stats post as well. All the blog posts are on the website at toughgirlchallenges.com. So you can go check that out. Now, I'm going to say this now, and it may not be done, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it will be done. I'm currently working, or I plan to start working on 2 YouTube videos for the trail. I'm going to do a short one, approximately 10 minutes long, but 2 minutes for sort of each day. Took me 5 days to do the trail, quick edits, just to give you a flavor of that trail and what it's like. And then previous suggestions or people have said to me they would prefer some sort of like longer videos or longer content. So I thought this is the perfect time to try this out. So I'm also going to do a longer version edit of the walk for YouTube as well. So there'll be a short version and a long version. That is my plan anyway. That is what I want to try and do before I head off for my next big adventure over in Europe. So that's what I'm working on completing. So hopefully when you listen to this, you can go and visit Tough Girl Challenges YouTube channel and the vlogs will be there for you to watch. But please do let me know what you think. Do you like the short form content? Do you prefer the long form content? Do you like having both options there? Maybe just watch the short form version first, and then if you're really interested and want to know more, you can watch the longer version. I'd really appreciate your feedback. So thanks again for listening to the Tough Girl podcast. New episodes go live every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. The episodes will continue to come out while I am away on expeditions, on adventures, on challenges. I do schedule them in advance. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. It's just getting all of the podcast episodes edited until October, which is when I will be back. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.